I walked into the bank that Tuesday morning with one simple goal: close my account, collect the remaining balance, and never return. It was supposed to take 15 minutes. I had rehearsed the conversation in my head while driving there, sign the paperwork, hand over my debit card, and move on with my life. After 23 years of banking with the same institution, I had finally had enough hidden fees, endless waiting, automated customer service, and a growing feeling that I was just another number in their system had pushed me to make the decision. The lobby looked exactly as it always had. Marble floors reflected the bright lights overhead. Customers waited quietly in line, while soft music played through hidden speakers. Employees smiled politely behind polished desks. I took a ticket and waited. When my number flashed across the screen, I approached a banker named Daniel. He looked to be in his early 40s, neatly dressed with silver-rimmed glasses, and the kind of practiced smile that came from years of customer service. "Good morning, how may I help you today?" "I'd like to close all my accounts." His smile remained, but only for a second. I'm sorry to hear that. He typed my account number into his computer. Then everything changed. His fingers froze over the keyboard. His smile disappeared, the color drained from his face so quickly that I thought he was about to faint. He stared at the monitor without blinking. Then he slowly looked back at me. His voice had become almost a whisper. "Ma'am." "Yes, have you seen what's in your account?" I frowned. My savings there should be around $8,000. He swallowed hard. "I don't think you're looking at the correct account."
"What do you mean?" Without answering.
He stood. "I need to get my manager." Before I could ask another question, he hurried away. The customers nearby continued with their own business, completely unaware that something strange had just happened. A few moments later, Daniel returned with an older woman, wearing a navy blue blazer and a badge. Identifying her as the branch manager, she introduced herself calmly, but I noticed she looked just as nervous as Daniel. "Mrs. Carter, yes. Would you mind coming into my office?" I followed her through a glass door into a private room. Once the door closed, she locked it. That was when I knew something was terribly wrong. She sat across from me and folded her hands. "Mrs. Carter, before we continue, I need to verify your identity again. I already showed my driver's license. I understand, but we need additional verification." She asked several security questions that only I could answer. My mother's maiden name, the street where I grew up, the name of my first employer. After I answered everything correctly, she nodded slowly. "Thank you." I leaned forward. "Will someone please tell me what's happening?" The manager turned her monitor toward me. "I believe this belongs to you." I looked at the screen. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then I noticed the balance. It wasn't 8,000, it wasn't 80,000. It wasn't even 800,000. The account contained 47,312,964. I laughed. "This is some kind of mistake." "No, it has to be." She shook her head. "The account number matches your identity." I stared at the screen. I've never had that kind of money. Daniel quietly placed several printed documents on the desk. "The funds have been accumulating for years." Accumulating from where? That's what we're trying to understand. My hands began shaking. There must be another customer. There isn't. The manager opened another file. The account was converted into a private trust nearly 19 years ago. I never created a trust according to these documents. She paused. "Someone created it on your behalf." I felt my stomach tighten. Who? She looked uncomfortable. "The trustee's identity is sealed." Sealed, legally sealed. I had never heard of such a thing. She continued. "Whoever established the trust required that it remain anonymous unless certain conditions were met." What conditions? The beneficiary attempting to permanently close every account connected to the trust. Silence filled the room. "I came here to close my account." "Exactly." She slid a thick envelope across the desk. "It appears this was meant to be given to you today." The envelope looked old, very old. The paper had yellowed with age. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were 6 words. "To be opened only by Emily Carter." My heart raced. That was my name. The handwriting looked strangely familiar. I carefully broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first sentence stole my breath. "If you are reading this, then I have kept my promise." The signature wasn't visible yet. I continued reading. "I know you'll spend years wondering why I disappeared." Without saying goodbye, I wanted to explain, but I couldn't. "The people looking for me would have found you." I frowned. "Looking for me?" The letter continued. "I invested every dollar I could save. I promised myself that if I survived, I would return if I didn't. I wanted to make sure you would never struggle again. Tears slowly formed in my eyes. There was only one person who ever made promises like that, my older brother Michael. 20 years earlier, Michael had vanished without warning. Police searched for months. There were no clues, no body. No explanation eventually. Everyone accepted that he was probably dead. Everyone except me. The manager watched quietly as I continued reading. I know you'll be angry, I deserve that. But I hope one day you'll understand that leaving was the only way to protect you. I reached the signature "Love always, Michael." I couldn't breathe, my brother. The manager nodded gently. We suspected the letter might answer some questions, but he's dead, we don't actually know that. She handed me another document. The trust has received regular deposits every 6 months. I looked at the dates. Every deposit had arrived like clockwork. The latest one 3 weeks earlier. If Michael was dead who had been making the deposits, the manager continued, every transfer originated through international financial institutions from where the countries changed constantly. Switzerland, Singapore, Norway, Canada, Australia, the Cayman Islands. Different locations, different currencies. Always converted before arriving. Always the exact same date. Always the same authorization code. Someone had spent 2 decades making sure I never knew. I looked back at the letter. Another page fell from the envelope. This one contained only a single sentence. When you finally know the truth, look inside Dad's old toolbox. I blinked. My father's toolbox still sat untouched in my garage. After he passed away 5 years earlier, I couldn't bring myself to throw away any of his tools. The manager noticed my expression. Do you know what that means? I think so. I thanked everyone and left the bank carrying the envelope. The drive home felt unreal. Every traffic light seemed to last forever. Every mile raised more questions than answers. As soon as I reached my garage, I pulled the dusty red toolbox onto my workbench. It was heavier than I remembered. Inside were old screwdrivers, wrenches, measuring tapes, and faded photographs. Nothing unusual then. I noticed something. The bottom seemed thicker than it should be. I pushed gently. A hidden compartment popped open. Inside rested a small metal key. Alongside it was another envelope. My name was written on it. My hands trembled as I opened it. This letter was from my father. If you've reached this point, then Michael succeeded. I felt tears streaming down my face. He wasn't running away from us. The letter said he was protecting us. According to my father, Michael had uncovered a massive financial fraud while working overseas. Powerful people wanted him silenced. Instead of risking our lives, he disappeared voluntarily, with help from international investigators. He secretly testified against criminal organizations that stole billions for security reasons. His identity had to remain hidden. The government relocated him permanently. He was forbidden from contacting family directly. The trust had been established through legal channels as compensation for years of separation and confidential service. My father had known he simply couldn't tell anyone. At the end of the letter, one final paragraph appeared. If the day ever comes when the investigation is officially closed, Michael will find you 3 months past. Life slowly returned to normal. The money remained untouched while lawyers explained everything. I donated part of it to hospitals. Another portion funded scholarships in my parents' names. I paid off debts for relatives who had quietly struggled for years. But every evening I wondered the same thing. Was Michael still alive one rainy afternoon? Someone knocked on my front door. I wasn't expecting visitors. Standing on my porch was an older man with gray hair and tired, blue eyes for a second. I didn't recognize him. Then he smiled. It was the exact same smile my brother had when we were children. I know I've kept you waiting, he said softly. 20 years disappeared in a heartbeat. Neither of us spoke. We simply embraced, holding on as if letting go would make him disappear again. He apologized through tears. I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Sometimes the greatest fortunes aren't measured in money. 47 million changed my future, but it wasn't what healed my heart. The real treasure was learning that hope had been alive all along. Some promises take decades to keep. Some sacrifices remain invisible until the perfect moment. And sometimes, the reason someone disappears isn't because they stopped loving you. Sometimes they disappear because loving you meant protecting you, even if it cost them everything. That ordinary trip to close a simple bank account became the day I found not only a hidden fortune, but the family I thought I had lost forever. And every time I remember the frightened look on the banker's face, I smile because neither of us could have imagined that behind one forgotten account was a story of loyalty, sacrifice, and a brother who never broke his promise. The reunion with Michael should have answered every question. Instead, it opened dozens more. For 3 days, he stayed at my house, sleeping in the guest room that had once belonged to our parents. He barely spoke about the past. Whenever I asked where he had been or what he had done all those years, he would smile sadly and say, "One day you'll know everything." It was frustrating. I had waited 20 years to see my brother again, and now he was sitting across the dinner table, refusing to explain why he had disappeared. On the 4th morning, I found him standing alone in the backyard, staring at the sunrise. "You haven't slept, have you?" I asked. He shook his head. "I've been waiting for this morning for 2 decades. What happens today?" He looked at me with a strange expression. Today I stopped looking over my shoulder. Before I could ask what he meant, a black SUV slowly pulled into the driveway. Then another and another 5 vehicles stopped outside my house. Men and women wearing dark suits stepped out. My heart immediately began racing. Michael didn't seem surprised. "They're here," he whispered. The front doorbell rang. Michael opened the door before I could reach it. The woman standing outside smiled warmly. "Mr. Carter." He nodded. "It's over." She handed him a sealed folder. "It's officially closed." The woman then turned toward me. "Mrs. Carter, my name is Rebecca Hayes. I'm with the Department of Justice." I froze. "Department of Justice?" She nodded. "We owe your family an apology." They gathered in my living room. Rebecca explained that 21 years earlier, Michael had uncovered evidence that one of the largest international financial crime organizations had infiltrated banks, investment firms, and shipping companies across several countries. Billions of dollars had disappeared. Hundreds of innocent people had lost their savings. Several investigators who came close to exposing the organization had vanished without a trace. Michael had accidentally become one of the key witnesses after discovering secret financial records while working as an accountant for an international corporation. The moment they realized what he knew, Rebecca explained his life was in danger. Michael looked down at his hands. "I thought I could simply report it to the police." Rebecca sighed. "Unfortunately, corruption reached much deeper than anyone imagined. Within days, Michael had been placed into one of the most secret witness protection operations in modern history. Even our parents weren't allowed to know where he had gone. The fewer people who knew, Rebecca continued, the safer. Everyone remained. I looked at my brother, so every birthday, every Christmas, I remembered all of them. He said quietly, "I just couldn't call." Tears filled his eyes. I wrote hundreds of letters. What happened to them? They were never mailed. Rebecca opened the folder. Inside were photographs. Some showed Michael with different hairstyles. Others showed him wearing glasses or a beard. His appearance changed constantly. He had lived under 6 different identities. He had moved between 11 countries. He had learned 4 new languages. Every few years, his entire life changed again. Different home, different job, different name, everything. It wasn't living, he admitted. It was surviving. Rebecca placed another stack of documents on the table. The criminal network has now been dismantled. More than 400 people had been arrested. Hundreds of shell companies had been shut down. Over $12 billion in stolen assets had been recovered. Several governments had worked together for nearly 2 decades to complete the investigation. Michael had become the most important witness. Without his testimony, none of it would have happened. I stared at him in disbelief. "You saved thousands of families." He smiled faintly. "I was just doing what anyone should." Rebecca laughed softly. "No." She shook her head. "Most people would have run." Before leaving, she handed Michael one final envelope. "This belongs to you now after everyone left." Michael opened it. Inside was a passport bearing his real name. For the first time in 20 years, he officially existed again. He stared at it for several minutes without speaking. "I never thought I'd hold one of these again." Life slowly became peaceful. Michael bought a small cabin outside town. He said he wanted somewhere quiet. No cities, no crowds. Those cameras. He spent most mornings fishing at a nearby lake. People simply knew him as the friendly older man who always smiled. Months passed. One afternoon, he invited me over. When I arrived, he was building a wooden bench beside the lake. "I've never seen you this happy," I told him. He smiled. "I finally feel ordinary." We sat together watching ducks swim across the water. Then he became serious. "I never told you about the suitcase." What suitcase? The one I buried before I disappeared. I nearly laughed. You buried a suitcase. He nodded. I had no choice. That evening we drove to our childhood home, which had long since been abandoned. Tall grass covered the backyard. The old oak tree still stood exactly where we had climbed as children. Michael counted several steps from the trunk. Then he began digging about 2 feet below the surface. The shovel struck metal. He carefully lifted out an old waterproof case. Despite 20 years underground, it remained sealed. Inside were notebooks, flash drives, photographs, and one small velvet pouch. Michael opened it carefully. Inside rested an antique gold pocket watch. It belonged to Grandpa. I thought it was lost. It wasn't, he smiled sadly. I carried it for luck. Hidden beneath the watch was another letter. This one surprised both of us. It wasn't written by Michael. It was written by Grandpa decades earlier. If my grandchildren ever read this together, then family has survived. Neither of us remembered Grandpa writing letters. He had died when we were very young. The letter spoke about courage, honesty, and sacrifice, but one paragraph caught our attention. Our family has always believed wealth should heal people, not control them. Michael looked at me. That's why I wanted you to use the trust wisely. Together we decided to honor Grandpa's words. Over the next year, we established the Carter Family Foundation. Scholarships helped students who couldn't afford college. Small businesses received emergency grants. Children's hospitals received new equipment. Veterans struggling with housing found support. We never placed our names on buildings. Michael insisted if people remember anything, he said, let them remember kindness. News eventually spread about anonymous donations changing lives across the state. Reporters searched endlessly for the mysterious benefactors. No one guessed it was us one winter evening. Michael called unexpectedly. Can you come to the cabin? His voice sounded different. I drove there immediately. He sat beside the fireplace holding Grandpa's pocket watch. I've been thinking about what my life. He smiled peacefully. For 20 years. I kept asking why everything happened, and now I finally understand. He handed me another envelope. No, I laughed. Not another mystery, this one's different. I opened it. Inside was his will. You already made one? He nodded. I've spent too much of my life assuming tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. I couldn't argue with that. Then he said something that stayed with me forever. We spend years chasing money because we think it buys freedom. He looked around the cozy cabin. But freedom isn't money, it's waking up without fear. Several years later, Michael's story was quietly declassified. A documentary was released with his permission. Millions watched the unbelievable story of the accountant who helped dismantle one of history's largest financial crime networks. People called him a hero. He hated that word. I'm just a brother who wanted his family safe. He always said whenever interviewers asked about the millions waiting in the bank account. Michael always smiled. They think that's the miracle. He would point toward me. The miracle was that my sister never stopped believing I'd come home. Every year, on the anniversary of the day I tried to close my bank account, we returned to that same branch. Daniel still worked there. He always laughed whenever he saw us. I'll never forget the look on your face, he joked. Michael would grin. You should have seen hers. We all laughed together. The account that once held $47 million became something much greater than a fortune. It became a reminder that hope can survive longer than fear, that family can endure even decades of silence, and that the greatest investments are never measured by numbers on a screen, but by the lives we choose to change. Whenever someone asks me what the best day of my life was, they expect me to mention the money. I never do. The best day of my life was the moment an ordinary banker turned pale, looked me in the eyes, and asked one unforgettable question. Ma'am, have you seen what's in your account? Because hidden behind that balance wasn't just unimaginable wealth. It was a brother's promise kept at last.